Henry Royce was 9 years old when poverty forced him into the streets of London, selling newspapers just to eat. Decades later, that same boy would create Rolls-Royce, a brand so exclusive that kings, billionaires, and celebrities still treat it like the ultimate symbol of success. But here's what makes this story unbelievable. Henry Royce didn't come from wealth, power, or education. He barely finished school. He had no investors, no famous family, and no reason to believe he could compete against the richest manufacturers in Europe. What he did have was a dangerous obsession with perfection, an obsession that would eventually build one of the most iconic luxury empires in history. From sleeping hungry as a child to creating the car brand that defined luxury itself, this is the incredible story of how a newspaper boy built Rolls-Royce. 1. The child who grew up too fast. Henry Royce was born in England in 1863 into a struggling family that quickly collapsed financially. When his father died, Henry was only 9 years old, and survival immediately became more important than childhood. He sold newspapers during the day and delivered telegrams at night just to help his family eat. Most children in Victorian England never escaped poverty once they were born into it. Henry barely received a formal education, completing only a few years of school before entering full-time work. But even while exhausted, he became fascinated with machinery and engineering. A relative eventually noticed his discipline and paid for an apprenticeship with the Great Northern Railway Company. For the first time, Henry discovered something he truly loved: mechanical engineering. He spent countless hours studying tools, engines, and systems long after others stopped working. But there was a problem. The money supporting his apprenticeship ran out after only a few years. Henry was forced to leave before finishing his training. Still, he had already developed the mindset that would define his future: perfection through relentless work. 2. The engineer obsessed with precision. After leaving the railway program, Henry entered the growing electrical industry in London. Electricity was transforming Britain at the time, and skilled engineers were becoming extremely valuable. Henry quickly earned a reputation for precision, discipline, and impossible standards. At just 19 years old, he became chief electrician at a major company called Maxim Western Electric. For someone who grew up selling newspapers in the streets, it was an extraordinary rise. But the success didn't last long. The company eventually collapsed, throwing Henry back into uncertainty. Instead of searching for another safe job, Henry made a risky decision. With barely any money, he partnered with fellow engineer Ernest Claremont and launched his own business in 1884. They lived above their tiny workshop in Manchester while building electrical equipment during the day and sleeping beside their machines at night. Their breakthrough came through a simple product: the electric doorbell. Henry designed versions that were more reliable than competitors, and sales exploded. Soon, the company expanded into cranes, motors, and industrial equipment, generating revenues worth millions in today's money. Henry had escaped poverty, but a much bigger opportunity was still waiting for him. 3. The car that changed everything. By the early 1900s, Henry's business was under pressure from powerful American competitors entering Britain. The stress destroyed his health, and doctors advised him to rest and buy a car for easier travel. Ironically, that advice would change his life forever. Henry purchased a small French automobile expecting convenience. Instead, he hated it. The vehicle was noisy, unreliable, difficult to start, and poorly engineered. At a time when most people accepted cars as unstable machines, Henry refused to tolerate the flaws. So he began rebuilding the car himself. He redesigned parts, improved systems, and studied every mechanical weakness obsessively. Eventually, the original vehicle barely resembled what he had purchased. And that's when everything changed. Henry realized he could build something far superior to anything on the market. In 1904, he completed his first vehicle, the Royce 10. Compared to other automobiles of the era, it was smoother, quieter, and dramatically more reliable. One businessman who bought the car became obsessed with showing it to influential people across England. And that eventually led Henry Royce to the man who would help turn his engineering into a global empire. 4. When Rolls met Royce. Charles Rolls came from the complete opposite world, wealthy, educated, and connected to British high society. He was already known as one of England's biggest automobile enthusiasts. He owned dealerships, raced cars, and dreamed of creating a world-class British automotive brand. At first, Charles dismissed Henry Royce's car because it only had a 2-cylinder engine. But once he finally drove it, everything changed. The vehicle felt smoother and quieter than almost anything else on the road. Charles immediately understood he was looking at engineering genius. In 1904, the partnership between Rolls and Royce officially began. Royce focused entirely on building perfect machines, while Charles handled wealthy clients, marketing, and expansion. Together, they created a combination the industry had never seen before. Then came the Silver Ghost in 1907. The car became famous for its silence, reliability, and extraordinary engineering. During a public endurance test, it traveled thousands of miles without major mechanical failure while competitors constantly broke down. One journalist called it the best car in the world, and the phrase transformed Rolls-Royce into a global symbol of luxury. 5. From survival to immortality. Rolls-Royce quickly became the preferred brand for royalty, industrialists, and elites across the world. But success came with tragedy. Charles Rolls died in a plane crash at only 33 years old, becoming the first British pilot killed in an aviation accident. The loss devastated the company. Meanwhile, Henry's health continued declining from years of overwork, but he refused to stop designing. During World War I, Rolls-Royce shifted into aircraft engines, helping power some of Britain's most important military planes. That decision saved the company financially and transformed it into a major force beyond luxury cars. Over the decades, Rolls-Royce survived economic collapses, wars, bankruptcy, and ownership changes. Yet the brand never lost the identity Henry Royce created: obsessive perfection. Even today, Rolls-Royce vehicles are handcrafted symbols of status, with some custom models costing tens of millions of dollars. The incredible part is that none of it began with privilege. It began with a poor newspaper boy who became obsessed with building things better than everyone else. Henry Royce didn't just create luxury cars. He created a standard so high that the world still associates his name with perfection more than a century later. It's hard to imagine that one of the most luxurious brands on earth was created by someone who once struggled to afford food. But maybe that's exactly why Henry Royce became who he was. Poverty taught him discipline, hardship taught him endurance, and failure taught him precision. Because in the end, Rolls-Royce was never really about cars. It was about refusing to accept mediocrity in a world full of it. What do you think was the real reason Rolls-Royce became so successful? Henry Royce's obsession with perfection, or Charles Rolls' vision and ambition? And which luxury brand story should we cover next? Subscribe for more stories about power, money, luxury, and the people who built global empires from absolutely nothing.